Luke 21:20 through 24. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. What did Jesus mean when he referred to the time of the Gentiles? When did the times of the Gentiles begin? When will the times of the Gentiles end? What events will happen during this period of time when Gentiles dominate Israel? Hi, my name is Cynthia, and I'm a child of God, and I'm here to share with you the gospel, which is the good news. So what is the good news? It's that Jesus left his throne in heaven, was born a baby in a humble manger, lived a perfect, sinless life, died on the cross for you and me, for the sins of the world, rose again 3 days later, and ascended into heaven 40 days later. And he's coming back for us very soon in a pre-tribulation rapture. At the end of the 7-year tribulation that's to follow, we will return with him and reign on the earth for 1,000 years. After that 1,000 years, Satan will be thrown into the lake of fire, and we go into eternity. So how can you be saved? Believe the gospel. That's it. It's that simple. Believe in Jesus. Put your trust and your faith in him and him alone, not in your works, not in your good deeds. Nothing you do can earn your place into heaven. Jesus did it all on the cross. And if you believe in him, you will be saved. Now, we have a lot to cover in this video. It's going to be one of my more in-depth videos. I've actually been stalling because it's going to be a longer one. But stay with me and we will discuss the times of the Gentiles. Now, what is a Gentile? A Gentile is anyone who's not a Jew. You are a Gentile if you are not Jewish. That's what a Gentile is. I believe that the times of the Gentiles refers to the period of time that began with the conquering of Jerusalem and the destruction of Solomon's temple by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians in 586 BC. We are currently living in the time of the Gentiles. The time of the Gentiles will end with the second coming of the Messiah, Jesus, who will defeat the Gentile armies led by the Antichrist at the Battle of Armageddon and deliver the Jews in Jerusalem. The times of the Gentiles started during the dispensation of law, includes the dispensation of grace, and will end at the end of the 7-year tribulation period before the start of the dispensation of the kingdom. The time of the Gentiles includes all of the 70 weeks, 490 years of Daniel's prophecy, Daniel 9:24 through 27. The times of the Gentiles include the church age from the Pentecost in Acts 2 until the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 17. The times of the Gentiles includes the 7-year tribulation period, the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy, predicted in Daniel 9:27 and explained in the book of Revelation, chapters 6 through 19. This video will survey the key events, dates, and people in the time of the Gentiles, during the time of the Gentiles. Number 1, no Jewish king sits on the throne of David ruling Israel. Number 2, 4 Gentile kingdoms in the past, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome dominate Israel. Number 3, Jerusalem has been conquered and the temple has been destroyed by Gentile armies in the past, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians in 586 BC, and then Titus and Romans in AD 70. And 4, Jerusalem will be conquered in the future by Gentile armies led by the Antichrist during the last half of the tribulation period. So we're going to start with the past history of the times of the Gentiles. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of an image of a metallic man which had a head of gold, a chest and arms made of silver, a belly and thighs made of bronze, legs made of iron, and feet with 10 toes made of part iron and part clay. Daniel 2:31 through 33. The different metals and parts of the image represent different Gentile kingdoms that will dominate Israel during the times of the Gentiles: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. In the first year of the reign of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream of 4 beasts. Daniel 7. Daniel wrote, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. Daniel 7:1 through 3. Daniel asked an angel for the interpretation of his vision, and he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts, which are four kings. Daniel 7:17. The 4 beasts came up out of the great sea, the Mediterranean Sea. The sea in prophetic literature represents the Gentile nations. The 4 beasts of Daniel's vision in Daniel 7 refer to the different Gentile kingdoms that dominate Israel during the times of the Gentiles: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Ironside points out the differences between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Chapter 7 covers practically the same ground as chapter 2. It takes the whole course of the times of the Gentiles, beginning with Babylon and ending with the overthrow of all derived authority and the establishment of the kingdom of the Son of Man. In the second chapter, when a Gentile king had a vision of the course of world empire, he saw the image of a man, stately and noble figure, that filled him with such admiration that he set up a similar statue to be worshipped as a god. But in this opening chapter of the second division, Daniel, the man of God, has a vision of the same empire, and he sees them as 4 ravenous wild beasts, of so brutal a character and so monstrous that no actual creatures known to man could adequately set them forth. Okay, so Daniel told King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon that he was the head of the gold in his dream of the metallic man. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. Daniel 2:36 through 38. Daniel wrote about the first beast in his vision in Daniel 7. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched until its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Daniel 7:4. Jeremiah described Babylon as a lion in Jeremiah 4:7. Ezekiel describes Babylon as a great eagle with large wings. Ezekiel 17:3. Daniel watched until the lion's wings were plucked off. It was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. This could be a reference to what happened to Nebuchadnezzar when he boasted about his empire and was judged by God to become like a beast. Read Daniel 4:28-33. The reference to his being made to stand on 2 feet like a man and being given a man's heart could be a reference to his return to his sanity and the restoration of his kingdom. Daniel 4:34-37. Now these are the dates. 605 to 562 BC, Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon. 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians invaded Judah, besieged Jerusalem, took the temple treasure and members of the royal family, and they took Daniel and his 3 friends to Babylon. Daniel 1:1-6. Now, 603 BC, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a metallic man with the different metals representing different Gentile kingdoms. Daniel 2. 597 BC, already. It's been a long day already. So 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians invaded Judah. King Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, Jehoiachin of Judah, along with Ezekiel and 10,000 Jews, were deported to Babylon. 2 Kings 24:14-16, and Ezekiel 41. No, Mattaniah, son of Josiah and uncle of Jehoiachin, was made king of Judah by Nebuchadnezzar and given the name Zedekiah. 2 Kings 24:17. In 593 BC, Hananiah predicted that Babylonian yoke would be destroyed by 591 BC. Jeremiah sent a letter to the captives in Babylon and told them to build houses and marry because they would be in captivity for 70 years. Jeremiah 29:10. Now, 592 BC, Ezekiel saw the vision of the abominations in the temple in Jerusalem and the departure of the glory of God from the temple. Ezekiel 8:11. January 15th, 588 BC through July 17th, 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians laid siege to Jerusalem. 2 Kings 25:1-3, Jeremiah 52:4-5. Because of Zedekiah's treaty with Pharaoh Hophra of Egypt in 589 BC, Ezekiel gave his parable of the boiling pot, Ezekiel 24:1-14, on the day of his wife's death, Ezekiel 24:15-18. July 18th, 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians took Jerusalem. Zedekiah was taken prisoner, his sons were killed before his eyes, and then he was taken to Babylon, where he died in prison. 2 Kings 25:4-7, Jeremiah 39:6-7, and 52:9-11, Ezekiel 12:11-13, and chapter 17, verse 16. King Zedekiah was the last king of Judah to sit on the throne of David. Ezekiel prophesied that Zedekiah would be the last king until he comes whose right it is to wear the crown. Ezekiel 21:25-27. Ezekiel is making reference to Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from beneath his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. The word Shiloh means the one to whom it belongs, and is a reference to the Messiah. Ezekiel predicted that Zedekiah would be the last ruler to sit on the Davidic throne until Messiah comes. August 15th, 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem's walls and burned Solomon's temple to the ground on the 9th of AB. 2 Kings 25, 8-10, Jeremiah 52, 12-14. The Babylonians took the Jews into captivity to Babylon in 2 Kings 25, 11-12. And they took the bronze pillars from the temple building, 2 Kings 25, 13-19. The times of the Gentiles began with Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon's destruction of Jerusalem and Solomon's temple in 586 BC. Since 586 BC, no Davidic king has sat on the throne of David, ruling Israel in Jerusalem. It appears to the world as if the gods of Babylon were greater than Yahweh, as Babylon defeated Judah. But Daniel would reveal in the book of Daniel that God is sovereign over world history, and his kingdom would come in dramatic fashion and crush the Gentile kingdoms in the future. So I have a few more dates for you here. 562 to 560 BC, evil Merodach ruled Babylon, Merodach. 560 to 556 BC, Neriglissar ruled Babylon, Neriglissar. In 556 BC, Labashi-Marduk ruled Babylon. Now, from 556 to 539 BC, Nabonidus ruled Babylon. He spent several years attempting to build a great commercial center at Tema in Arabia, and left his son Belshazzar in charge of the city. This explains why Daniel was raised to the third position in the kingdom of Babylon. Daniel 5, 7, and 16, and 29. 553 through 539 BC, Belshazzar was the son of Nabonidus and co-regent of Babylon. 553 BC, Daniel had the vision of the four beasts representing the four Gentile kingdoms in Daniel 7. 551 BC, Daniel had the visions of the ram and the goat in Daniel 8. October 12, 539 BC was the fall of Babylon. Belshazzar gave a great banquet and used the temple cups to serve wine, but he saw God's handwriting on the wall, and he was killed that night by the Persians. Daniel 5. Now, the next, we're going to talk about Medo-Persia, the second Gentile kingdom. Media is the name for northwest Iran. Persia is a description for ancient Iran. Cyrus of Persia brought Media under his control in 550 BC. The Medes and the Persians together conquered Babylon. Daniel 5:28. Now, Medo-Persia is described as the arms of silver in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the metallic man. Daniel 2:32. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. Daniel 2:39. As silver is inferior to gold, so the kingdom of Medo-Persia was inferior to Babylon. Medo-Persia is described as a bear in Daniel's vision in Daniel 7. And suddenly another beast, a second, like a bear, it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. Daniel 7:5. Persia was more prominent than Media. and that is why the bear is raised up one side. The 3 ribs between the bear's teeth refer to the countries conquered by Medo-Persia: Babylon to the west, Lydia to the north, and Egypt to the south. Medo-Persia is described as the ram in Daniel's vision in Daniel 8. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there, standing beside the river, was a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. Daniel 8, 3-4. The 2 horns of the ram refer to Media and Persia. Persia was greater than Media, and that is why one horn is described as higher than the other. Media was older than Persia, and that is why the higher horn came up last. The Persians under King Cyrus extended their kingdom west, north, and south. Now in 550 to 530 BC, Cyrus ruled Persia. Daniel 1:21, Daniel 6:28, and Daniel 10:1. October 29th, 539 BC, Cyrus came to Babylon as its liberator. He appointed Darius the Mede to become ruler. Daniel 5:31. 538 BC, Cyrus permitted the Jews to return to the land of Israel to rebuild the temple. 2 Chronicles 36:21-23, Ezra 1:1-4, and Ezra 6:3-5, in fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. Isaiah 44:28, Isaiah 45:1-13. Zerubbabel led 50,000 Jews back to Jerusalem in Ezra 1:4. The last verse of the Hebrew Bible contains Cyrus' decree for the Jews to return to build the temple. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is among you of all his people? May the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. 2 Chronicles 36:23. Now October 5th, 537 BC, the Jews set up the altar for the temple. Ezra 3:1-7. October 19th through the 25th, 537 BC, the Jews celebrated the Feast of the Tabernacles. Ezra 3:1-7. 536 BC, the Jews laid the foundation for the second temple. Ezra 3:8-13. Daniel was given a vision of the future of Israel during the Greek period and the future tribulation period. Daniel 10-12. 536 through 530 BC, the Samaritans hindered the rebuilding of the temple. Ezra 4:1-5. Now 536 BC, the final vision given to Daniel, Daniel 10-12, was given during the 3rd year of the reign of Cyrus. The exiles had returned to Israel, but Daniel had not returned. Daniel fasted for 3 weeks as he mourned this vision. Gabriel explained that the reason for his delay was that he was stopped for 21 days by the prince of Persia, a demon behind the Gentile king Cyrus. Daniel 10:13. Gabriel said that he had to go back to fight this demon of Persia, and then he said the prince of Greece, another demon, would come. Cross-reference with Daniel 10:20. Here we see that behind the Gentile kings were demons influencing their political decisions to oppose Israel and the Jews. Now 530 to 522 BC, Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus, ruled Persia. 530 to 520 BC, the work on the temple stopped. Ezra 4:24. 522 BC, Gamata ruled Persia. September 29, 522 BC, Darius, I returned home from Egypt campaign and killed Gameta. 521 through 486 BC, Darius I defeated 9 kings in 19 battles during the first 2 years of his reign, 521 through 520 BC. He then created a strong central government with straps to govern his provinces. He established a postal system with 111 stations from Susa to Euphesius. He gave permission for the temple in Jerusalem to be finished in Ezra 4:6. 520 BC, Zerubbabel led the Jews to resume the building of the temple under the encouragement of Haggai and Zechariah. Ezra 5:1 through 2, Haggai 1:1, 15 to 10, Zechariah 1:1, Zechariah 7, and Zechariah 7:1. 519 to 518 BC, Tattenai, a satrap of Syria, sent a letter to Darius protesting the rebuilding project, but Darius told Tattenai to leave the Jews alone. Ezra 5:3 through 6 and 14. Now 516 BC, the Jews finished rebuilding the second temple. So the elders of the Jews built, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Iddo. And they built and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the command of Cyrus. Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Now the temple was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which is in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Ezra 6:14 through 15. 490 BC, Darius the Great and the Persians fought against the Greeks and were defeated at the Battle of Marathon. 486 to 464 BC, Xerxes I ruled Persia. 483 BC, Xerxes I deposed Vashti as his queen and made Esther his queen in her place. Esther 2:5 through 18. He defeated Greece and took Athens. Daniel 11:2. 480 BC, the Persian fleet was defeated by the Greeks at the Battle of Salamis. 474 BC, Haman sent a letter to kill all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Esther 3 verse 7 and 12. The Jews were to be killed on March 8th, 473 BC. Xerxes helped deliver Esther, Mordecai, and the Jews from wicked Haman and his plot to destroy all the Jews. Haman hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. 473 BC, the Jews first celebrated the Feast of Purim. Esther 9:17 through 21. 464 to 423 BC, Xerxes I ruled Persia. 458 BC, Ezra led the second return of Jews from Persia back to the land of Israel. Ezra 7:8. Ezra confessed the sins of the Jews who had intermarried with foreign wives, and they divorced their foreign wives. Ezra 9 through 10. March 5th, 445 BC, Xerxes I made a decree for the Jews to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. This is the beginning date for Daniel's 70th week, 490 years prophesy in Daniel 9:24 through 27. Daniel predicted, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, 69 weeks total." The prophecy was fulfilled on March 31st, AD 30, when Jesus entered Jerusalem on a donkey, the triumphant entry. Now Xerxes I permitted Nehemiah, his cupbearer, to return to the land of Israel to rebuild broken down walls of Jerusalem in Nehemiah 1 through 2. Sanballat the Samaritan, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arab opposed the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah 2:19. September 22nd, 444 BC. Nehemiah and the Jews finished rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem in 52 days in spite of the opposition. Nehemiah 6 through 7. September 27th through 28th, 444 BC. Ezra read the book of the law and explained it to the people, and they celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles. Nehemiah 8. Now 430 BC, Ezra wrote 1st and 2nd Chronicles, the last two books of the Tanakh. 423 through 404 BC, Darius II ruled Persia. 404 through 359 BC, Xerxes II ruled Persia. 359 through 338 BC, Xerxes III ruled Persia. 338 through 336 BC, Arces ruled Persia. And 336 through 331 BC, Darius III ruled Persia. Now Greece is the third kingdom, the third Gentile kingdom. Greece was the third Gentile world power to conquer Israel. Philip of Macedon united the Greek city-states. Hellenism spread across the world as a result of Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia. Greek became the common language from 300 BC to AD 300. Daniel revealed to Nebuchadnezzar that in his dream of the metallic man that his belly and thighs were made of bronze. Daniel 2:32. Daniel interpreted the bronze belly and thighs as a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Daniel 2:39. Now Daniel wrote about the third beast in his vision in Daniel 7. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Daniel 7:6. The leopard with wings would be an incredibly fast creature. Alexander the Great conquered the known world faster than any other Gentile ruler. Daniel had a vision of the goat, Greece, defeating the ram, Medo-Persia, Daniel 8:1 through 14. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between its eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, when I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. Which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him. And there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken. Daniel 8:5 through 8. In this vision, the male goat represents Greece, and the large horn on the goat represents Alexander the Great. Through a series of battles, Alexander the Great and the Greek army defeated Darius and the Persians. Now 334 through 323 BC, Alexander the Great ruled Greece. Daniel predicted that Alexander the Greek would be a mighty king who would rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Daniel 11:3. Alexander the Great and his Greek army crossed the Hellespont to attack the Persians. When he came to Troy, Alexander honored Archelaus, whom he claimed to be his ancestor. Alexander defeated the Persians at Granicus. He cut the knot tied about the yoke of the chariot of the Phrygian king Gordius. 333 BC was the Battle of Issus. Issus. Alexander the Great and his Greek army defeated Darius and the Persians. Alexander then marched his army south along the coast. He laid siege and conquered Tyre. After Alexander conquered Gaza, he went up to Jerusalem and met Jaddua the high priest. Jaddua, Jaddua, the high priest. Josephus tells us that when Alexander the Great came to Jerusalem, that Jaddua, the high priest, showed him the reference in the book of Daniel, and Alexander spared the city. As a result, in 332 BC, Josephus wrote, when Jaddua, the high priest, heard that Alexander was coming, he was terrified and ordered his people to join him in prayer and sacrifice to God. When he learned that Alexander was not far from the city of Jerusalem, he went out in procession with the priests and the people. Alexander saw the procession coming toward him. The priests were clothed in linen, and the high priest in a robe of blue and gold. On his head was a mitre with the golden plate on which God's name was inscribed. Approaching alone, Alexander prostrated himself before the name and greeted the high priest. As the Jews welcomed Alexander with one voice, he replied, when I was in Macedonia, considering how I would become master of Asia, I saw this very person in my sleep, dressed as he is now. He urged me not to delay, but to cross over confidently and take dominion over the Persians. Alexander was escorted into Jerusalem by the high priest and his attendants. He went up to the temple where he sacrificed to God according to the high priest's directions. And when the book of Daniel was shown to him, which predicted that one of the Greeks would destroy the Persian Empire, he thought himself to be the one so designated. When he offered the Jews whatever they desired, the high priest asked that they might observe their own laws and be exempt from the tribute every 7th year. Alexander granted these requests. Alexander and the Greeks entered Egypt, and the country surrendered without a fight. Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, which later became the capital city of the Ptolemies. Alexander took an expedition to the oracle of Jupiter, Amun-Ra, where he was declared to be the son of the god. Alexander the Great led the Greek army to defeat Darius and the Persians once again, this time at the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander took his army as far as India before returning to Babylon. Now in 323 BC, Alexander the Great died as a result of malaria. 323 through 301 BC, the period of Diadochi, Greek for successors. After the death of Alexander the Great, there was a power struggle between Alexander the Great's 4 generals. The Greek Empire was divided into 4 realms. Now, Daniel had 2 visions concerning Greece and what would happen after the death of Alexander. In Daniel 7, Daniel wrote, after this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Daniel 7:6. The 4 heads refer to the 4 Greek rulers who came after the death of Alexander the Great. In Daniel 8:8, Daniel wrote, therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up towards the 4 wings of heaven. The large horn that was broken refers to the death of Alexander. The 4 horns that came up after Alexander refer to his 4 generals who became rulers as the Greek Empire was divided. Lysimachus ruled Thrace and Bithynia, Western Asia Minor. Ptolemy, Ptolemy, the first ruled Egypt, and Cassander ruled Macedonia, including Greece, and Seleucus ruled Syria and Babylon, including Persia. 323 through 198 BC, the Ptolemies were 14 kings of the Greek dynasty that ruled Egypt from 323 to 30 BC. They were friendly to the Jews and allowed them to maintain their religious freedom. They fought the Seleucidae for control of the land of Israel, 275, 245, 240, 219, 217, 202 through 198 BC. The capital city of Ptolemy's was Alexandria in Egypt. Daniel predicted the conflict between the kings of the south and the Seleucidae, the kings of the north. Daniel 11, 5 through 20. 323 through 285. Ptolemy I Soter was a general of Alexander the Great who became the ruler of Egypt and the first of the Ptolemies. Daniel 11, 5. 312 BC, Jerusalem was captured by Ptolemy I after he defeated Antigonus, son of Demetrius I, at the Battle of Gaza. Seleucus I Nicator traveled to Babylon, where he found the Seleucid Empire, or the Seleucid, Seleucid. 301 BC, Jerusalem was recaptured by Ptolemy I, Ptolemy the first. 285 through 246 BC, Ptolemy II Philadelphus ruled Egypt. Ptolemy II and Antiochus II, Theos of Syria, made an alliance with Antiochus II. Theos divorced his wife Laodice and married Ptolemy's daughter Bernice around 250 BC. Daniel 11:6. The Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, which was translated during the days of Ptolemy II of Philadelphus. 246 BC, Bernice and Antiochus II, Theos, lost their power when Laodice poisoned them, and Bernice's baby and Laodice's son Seleucus II, Callinicus, came to the throne in Syria. Few more to go through for some dates here. 246 through 221 BC, Bernice's brother Ptolemy III became the king of Egypt and fought against Syria and defeated Seleucus, I don't even know how to pronounce these, the second, Callinicus. Daniel 11, 7 through 8. Ptolemy III avenged the death of his sister Bernice, put Laodice to death, and returned to Egypt with many spoils of war. 227 BC, Seleucus II Callinicus, the king of the north, was defeated by Egypt, the king of the south, and after he died from falling off his horse, his son Seleucus II Soter began to reign. Daniel 11:9. 223 to 187 BC, Antiochus III became Seleucid ruler, king of the north, at 18 years old and ruled for 36 years. Daniel 11:10. 217 BC, Ptolemy the fourth Philopater of Egypt defeated Antiochus II of Syria. Daniel 11, 11 through 12. 203 BC, Antiochus III and the Seleucid Empire conquered Jerusalem after the Battle of Paninum, part of the Fifth Syrian War, in which Antiochus III the Great defeated the Ptolemies. Antiochus III won this battle with the support of some Jewish revolutionaries, the violent ones of your people. Daniel 11, 13 through 14. Antiochus sought to consolidate his control of Israel. He captured the fortified city of Sidon. Daniel 11, 15. 199 BC, Antiochus III had established himself in the beautiful land of Israel. Daniel 11:16. 193 BC, Antiochus III gave his daughter Cleopatra, not the one associated with Mark Antony, to marry the Egyptian king Ptolemy V Epiphanes, Daniel 11:17. This attempt to bring about a peaceful alliance failed. 190 BC, Antiochus III and the Seleucid army invaded Greece, but was defeated by the Romans at the Battle of Magnesia, Daniel 11:18. Antiochus III lost 53,000 men, while Rome lost only 400 men. His son, Antiochus IV, was taken to Rome as a hostage for 12 years. 187 BC, Antiochus III returned to Syria and died. His military campaigns were an attempt to reunite Alexander the Great's empire under his rule, but he failed. 187 through 176 BC, Seleucus IV, Philopator, ruled the Seleucid Empire. He heavily taxed his people to pay Rome. He was poisoned by Heliodorus after Seleucus IV sent him to rob the temple in Jerusalem, Daniel 11:20. 175 through 163 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes became the king of Seleucid Empire and ruled. He forced the Jewish high priest Onias III to step down in favor of his brother Jason, who was replaced by Menelaus 3 years later. Now, Daniel predicted the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes, who is described as the little horn of Daniel 8. Daniel wrote, "And out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land, Israel. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host, and some of the stars to the ground, and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth to the ground. He did all this and prospered." Daniel 8:9 through 14. The little horn of Daniel 8 refers to Antiochus IV Epiphanes, Epiphanes, the ruler of the Seleucid Empire. He was the 8th king of the Seleucid dynasty. He came to power in 175 BC after murdering his brother. Daniel gave this prediction in Daniel 11 about Antiochus Epiphanes, who is described as a ruler of the king of the north who would persecute Israel. "And in his place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. For he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province. And he shall do what his father have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, and riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great army. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. While returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant. So he shall do damage and return to his own land. At the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. For ships from Cyprus shall not come against him, or for ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage against the holy covenant. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery. But the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits, and those of the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Daniel 11:21 through 24. Now Antiochus IV Epiphanes illegally seized the Seleucid throne from Seleucus IV, Philopator, and proclaimed himself king. Daniel 11:21. The name Epiphanes means the illustrious one. He was nicknamed Epimanes, which means the madman. He turned aside an invading Egyptian army and deposed Onias II, the high priest who is called the Prince of the Covenant. Daniel 11:22. Antiochus IV made an alliance with Egypt after his military victories and robbed the rich and gave the money to his followers. Daniel 11:23 through 24. 170 BC, Antiochus IV attacked Egypt, defeated Ptolemy the Sixth at the Battle of Pelusium near Nile Delta. This fulfilled Daniel 11:25 through 27. Now 168 BC, Antiochus IV was forced to withdraw from Egypt by the Romans. Daniel 11:29 through 30. Roman general Populus Laenas drew a circle around Antiochus IV and told him to make a decision to leave Egypt. Antiochus IV returned to Israel in a rage. A little bit longer, and we're going to be getting to Rome. December 15th, 167 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes persecuted the Jews for their refusal to accept Greek customs. Daniel 11:30 through 32. He set up an altar to Zeus. He desecrated the temple in Jerusalem by offering a pig on the altar. Daniel 11:31 through 32. And first, MACC 141 through 64 and MACC 6. He looted Jerusalem, set fire to parts of the city, and slaughtered Jews on the Sabbath. He renamed the temple in Jerusalem for Zeus, prohibited circumcision and Sabbath observance, banned and burned Torah scrolls, and ordered sacrifices to pagan gods. And on the 15th day of Chislev, in the 145th year, they set up upon the altar an abomination of desolation, and in the cities of Judah, on every side they established high places, and they offered sacrifices at the doors of the houses and in the streets. And the book of the law which they found, they cut them in pieces and burned them in a fire. And according to the decree, they put to death the women who had circumcised their children, hanging their babies around their mothers' necks, and they put to death their entire families, together with those who had circumcised them. Oh, I get it. First Maccabees 154 through 64. 167 BC is the Maccabean revolt. Daniel predicted the Maccabean revolt. Daniel wrote, "Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue, and some of those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time." Daniel 11:34 through 35. Now, 166 BC, Mattathias was a priest who refused to offer the sacrifice to the Greek gods at Modin. He killed an apostate Jew who did, and this led to the insurrection. He lit the spark for the Jewish fight for freedom. 166 through 160 BC, Judas, called the Hammer, Judas Maccabeus, called the Hammer, led the Maccabees in the revolt against the Seleucid Empire. 164 BC, the Maccabees captured Jerusalem following the Battle of Bethzur and rededicated the temple. The Jewish feast of Hanukkah celebrates the liberation of Jerusalem. The lampstand in the temple had oil in it for 1 day, but it lasted for 8 days. The Jewish feast, which commemorates this victory of the Maccabees over the Seleucids, is called Hanukkah, or the Feast of Lights. Interestingly enough, Jesus taught in the temple during this festival of Hanukkah and declared that he is the light of the world. John 10:22. Now 139 BC, Simon signed a treaty with Rome which guaranteed the priests would have political power. He was made a high priest, and this legitimized the new dynasty of the Hasmoneans. 1 Maccabees 14:25 through 49. Now 135 through 63 BC, the Hasmoneans ruled Israel, a time of Jewish independence. The Hasmoneans were ruling priests in Israel from 135 to 63 BC. Two religious political parties emerged from them. The Hasidim represented the conservatives who resisted Hellenization in Israel, and they became known as the Pharisees. The Hellenizers adopted Greek customs, and this group became known as the Sadducees. Both of these groups vied for power in Israel. Pretty sure we're going to be doing a part 2 of this because we're almost at an hour. We're going to get through the past Gentile times of the Gentiles, and then my next video is going to be the present times of the Gentiles, because I have a lot still left to cover. But stick with me, and I think it'll be worth it. So the Hasmoneans were named after Matthias's great-grandfather, 1 Maccabees 14:25 through 49. For 80 years, the Jews experienced independence, and this time was viewed as the golden age of Jewish nationalism. This time of independence and self-rule did not mean that the times of the Gentiles had come to an end. The throne of David was not occupied by a king of David during this time. The nation would be conquered by Rome, the fourth Gentile kingdom, in 63 BC. The Jews would never live in Israel as a free, self-governing people again until the establishment of the nation of Israel in 1948. The times of the Gentiles can best be defined as that long period of time from the Babylonian Empire to the second coming of the Messiah, during which time the Gentiles will have dominance over the city of Jerusalem. This does not rule out temporary Jewish control of the city, but all such Jewish control will be temporary until the second coming of the Messiah. Such temporary control was exercised during the Maccabean period, 164 through 63 BC, the first Jewish revolt against Rome, AD 66 through 70. The second Jewish revolt against Rome, also known as the Bar Kokhba revolt, AD 132 through 135. And since 1967, as a result of the Six-Day War, this too is temporary, as Gentiles will tread down Jerusalem for at least another 3.5 years. Revelations 11, 1 through 2. Any Jewish takeover of the city of Jerusalem before the second coming of the Messiah must therefore be viewed as a temporary one, and does not mean that the times of the Gentiles have ended. The times of the Gentiles can only end when the Gentiles can no longer tread down the city of Jerusalem. Which brings us to Rome. We've got quite a bit, 20-25 minutes on Rome, and then I will continue with the present time in my next video, giving you all the information that I've been able to pull up. So Rome is the iron legs on Nebuchadnezzar's image in Daniel 2. The image in Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2 had iron legs. The iron legs on the image represent Rome, the fourth Gentile kingdom to conquer Israel. Daniel wrote, "And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others." Daniel 2:40. The fourth beast in Daniel's vision, recorded in Daniel 7, was a 10-horned monster beast. This 10-horned monster beast also represents Rome. Daniel wrote, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns." Daniel 7:7. 63 BC, Pompey and the Romans conquered Jerusalem and Israel. 49 BC, Julius Caesar became Roman Empire. He made war against Pompey and defeated him in Egypt. Because Antipater helped Julius Caesar, Julius made Antipater a Roman citizen. Antipater then made his son Herod governor over Galilee. Starting to get into some more familiar names here. So 4740 BC, Herod, later called the Great, was governor of Galilee. He went to Rome and became a friend of Caesar when the Parthians attacked and captured Jerusalem. Now 37 through 4 BC, Herod the Great ruled Israel as king. Josephus War 1, and this is in Josephus and Antiquities. He was the son of Antipater and an Idumean from Edom. He consolidated his power by killing members of his family, including some of his sons and his wife Miriam. Herod the Great was a great builder. He renovated the second temple in Jerusalem. Herod built palaces at Caesarea Maritima and in Jericho. He also built palaces and fortresses at the Herodium and Masada. Herod built the capital city of Samaria and renamed it Sebaste, from the Greek equivalent of Augustus. 31 or 30 BC AD, Caesar Augustus was first known as Octavian. He was the nephew of Julius Caesar. He defeated Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Caesar Augustus divided his territories into two types of provinces, senatorial and imperial. The senatorial provinces were ruled by proconsuls appointed by the Roman Senate for a one-year term. They ruled over the more loyal and peaceful provinces. The imperial provinces were ruled by legates appointed by the emperor himself, and prefects called procurators. Caesar Augustus was the Roman Empire when Jesus was born, Luke 2:1. Quintus was the legate of Syria in Luke 2:2. Now 4 BC, Jesus is the descendant of David who will sit on the Davidic throne, ruling Israel in the future millennial kingdom. There are two genealogies of Jesus in the Gospels, one in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 through 17, and one in Luke 3:23 through 38. Why are there two genealogies of Jesus? The genealogy of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew focuses on the line of Joseph. The genealogy begins with Abraham and ends with Christ. It traces the line of King David through Solomon and goes from father to son. The genealogy is divided into 3 sections of 14 names each. Abraham to David, Matthew 1, 2 through 6. David to Jeconiah, Matthew 1, 6 through 11. And Jeconiah to Joseph, Matthew 1, 12 through 16. So why wasn't Joseph seated on the throne of David, ruling Israel from Jerusalem? The reason is that God placed a curse on King Jecoshin, who was a wicked king of Judah. Read Jeremiah 22, 24 through 30. God said this about King Jeconiah: "Write this man down as childless, a man who shall not prosper in his days, for none of his descendants shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah." Jeremiah 22:30. Jeconiah did have children and descendants, but none of Jeconiah's children or descendants ruled Israel sitting on the throne of David. The right to rule Israel as king was passed down from father to son, but Israel now had a dilemma. God had placed a curse on King Jeconiah and his descendants. Who could reign as king of Israel if the line of David was cursed? Joseph was a physical descendant of David and Jeconiah. Joseph was a carpenter in Nazareth and not a king in Jerusalem. Joseph had the legal right to rule Israel because he was a physical descendant of David, but he could not rule because he was the physical descendant of Jeconiah. The virgin birth of Jesus to Mary is the solution to the curse placed on Jeconiah. Matthew identified Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. Matthew 1:16, the word "of whom" in Greek is a feminine relative pronoun. Matthew indicated here that Jesus was the physical son of Mary, but not of Joseph. In this way, Jesus avoided the curse placed on Jeconiah and his physical descendants. Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, who was a physical descendant of King David through Nathan. Jesus received the physical right to rule Israel through Mary. The genealogy of Jesus through Mary is found in Luke chapter 3, 23 through 38. Joseph passed on the legal right to rule Israel by naming Jesus as his son. Matthew 1:25. Notice he called his name Jesus, or Yeshua. This is why the two genealogies of Jesus are necessary. Only Jesus can prove that he is the rightful heir to the Davidic throne. He is the physical descendant of Jesus through Mary, who has the legal right to sit on David's throne because Joseph named him as son. Before Jesus was born, the angel Gabriel told Mary that God would give her a son, Jesus, the throne of his father David, and he would reign over Israel forever. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Luke 1:32 through 33. Now 4 BC, Herod the Great had some Jewish boy babies in Bethlehem killed in his attempt to kill the baby Jesus. Matthew 2:16 through 18. After changing his will several times, Herod the Great died, and his kingdom was divided among his 3 surviving sons. Archelaus ruled Judea, Matthew 2:22. Antipas ruled Galilee and Perea, and Philip ruled Iturea and Trachonitis. Luke 3:1. Herod the Great was buried at the Herodium. AD 14 through 37. Tiberius Caesar ruled Rome. Luke 3:1, Luke 20:22, Luke 25, Luke 23:2, John 19:12, and chapter 15. Now March 31st, AD 30, Jesus entered Jerusalem riding on a donkey in the event known as the triumphal entry. In Luke 19:19 through 43, Jesus wept over Jerusalem and said, "If you had known, even you especially, in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation." Luke 19:42 through 44. Jesus predicted on his triumphal entry that Jerusalem would be surrounded by enemies and destroyed. This prediction was fulfilled by Titus and the Romans 40 years later in the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. Jesus gave the reason for Jerusalem's destruction. The Jews did not know or recognize the time of their visitation. On Palm Sunday, the Jews hailed Jesus as their Messiah. But on Good Friday, they cried, "Crucify him." The day of visitation was predicted by Daniel. The triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem happened on the day when Messiah, the Prince, would be presented to Israel at the end of the 483 years predicted by Daniel in Daniel 9:25. Jesus gave his Olivet discourse after he predicted the destruction of the temple, just as the glory of God left Solomon's temple and then it was destroyed by the Babylonians. So Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple as he left it to go to the Mount of Olives, where he predicted the times of the Gentiles. Matthew 23:38 and Matthew 24:1 through 3. Roman governor Pontius Pilate sentenced Jesus to be crucified, but on the third day, King Jesus arose from the dead. The risen Jesus appeared to his disciples for 40 days and gave infallible proofs of his resurrection. Then Jesus ascended to the third heaven to sit down on the Father's throne in heaven. Luke 24:50 through 53 and Acts 1:9 through 11. Several factors indicate that David's throne is separate and distinct from God's throne in heaven. First, several descendants of David have sat on his throne, but only one of his descendants ever sits on the right hand of God's throne in heaven. That descendant is Jesus Christ. Psalms 110 verse 1, Hebrews 8:1, and Hebrews 12:2. Second, David's throne was not established before his lifetime, 2 Samuel 7:16 through 17. But contrast, since God has always ruled over his creation, his throne in heaven was established long before David's throne. Psalms 93:1 through 2. And third, since God's throne is in heaven was established long before David's throne, and since God's throne is established forever, Lamentations 5:19, then it was not necessary for God to promise to establish David's throne forever, 2 Samuel 7:16. If they are the same throne. Fourth, David's throne was on earth, not in heaven. David and his descendants who sat on his throne exercised an earthly ruling authority. They never existed ruling authority in or from heaven. By contrast, as noted earlier, the Bible indicates that God's throne is in heaven. And fifth, the Bible's consistent description of David's throne indicates that it belongs to David. When God talked to David about his throne, God referred to it as your throne. 2 Samuel 7:16, Psalm 89:4, and Psalm 132:12. When God mentioned David's throne to others, he referred to it as his throne. Psalm 89:29, Jeremiah 33:21, David's throne, Jeremiah 13:13, and the throne of David, Jeremiah 17:25, Jeremiah 22:2, Jeremiah 4, Jeremiah 22:30. By contrast, the scripture's consistent description of the throne in heaven indicates that it belongs to God the Father. Now, let's see. What else do I need you to know? Well, let's talk about in AD 70. We're going to jump ahead to AD 70. The Romans, led by General Titus, the son of Vespasian, destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple on the 9th of AV, the same date as Solomon's temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. The Roman general Titus did not want to destroy the temple. He told the Jewish defenders of the city, I appeal to my own army and the Jew that are now with me, and even to you yourselves, that I do not force you to defile the sanctuary. And if you will but change the place where you will fight, no Roman shall either come near your sanctuary or offer any affront to it. No, I will endeavor to preserve your holy house, whether you will or not. But after Jerusalem was taken by the Romans, Titus gave the order that they should now demolish the entire city and temple. But for all the rest of the wall, it was so thoroughly laid even with the ground by those that dug it up to the foundation, that there was nothing left to make those that came after believe that it had ever been inhabited. The destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70 fulfilled Jesus' prediction that he made to the disciples in AD 30. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Matthew 24, 1-2. So I think we're going to jump ahead again a little bit to AD 136 through 140. A temple to Jupiter was built on the Temple Mount, and a temple to Venus was built over Golgotha. In AD 138, Christians were permitted to return to Jerusalem after the death of Hadrian, and Antoninus Pius became the Roman Empire. Now in AD 259, Jerusalem is ruled by Odeanthius as king of the Palmyrene Empire. AD 272, Jerusalem becomes part of the Roman Empire again after Aurelian defeats the Palmyrene Empire at the Battle of Emesa or Homs. AD 313, Constantine I issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity throughout the Roman Empire. AD 325, Jews are banned from entering Jerusalem except once a year to pray at the Western Wall on Tishba B'Av. AD 326, Helena, Constantine's mother, visited Jerusalem and ordered the destruction of Hadrian's temple to Venus built over Calvary. Helena supposedly found the cross of Christ during the excavation. Now, AD 335, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is built over the place of Calvary. AD 361, Julian the Apostate became Roman emperor and permits Jews to return to Jerusalem. Alpius of Antioch is commissioned to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. AD 363, an earthquake in Galilee, along with the death of Julian the Apostate at the Battle of Samara, ends the attempt to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Now, AD 614, Jerusalem is destroyed. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is burned. Much of the Christian population of Jerusalem is killed. AD 617, a mob of Christians killed Jewish governor Nehemiah ben Hoshiel. AD 625, Mohammed made the Al-Aqsa Mosque one of the three holy mosques of Islam. AD 629, Byzantine Emperor Herculius took Jerusalem after the defeat of the Sassanid Empire at the Battle of Nineveh in 627. AD 637, Caliph Umar the Great conquered Jerusalem and entered the city after his defeat of the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Yarmouk. AD 691, Muslim Caliph Abdallah finished the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. AD 701, Muslim Caliph Al-Walid finished the Al-Aqsa Mosque. AD 10,099 to 1,118, Crusaders captured Jerusalem and made the Dome of the Rock into a Christian church, the Temple of the Lord, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque into the headquarters of the Order of the Knights Templar. AD 1187, Saladin recaptured Jerusalem for the Muslims and makes the Dome of the Rock and Ask back into mosques. AD 1541, the Golden Gate is seated to bar the Messiah from entering the gate and ruling Jerusalem. The Golden Gate is sealed to bar the Messiah from entering the gate and ruling Jerusalem. AD 1799, Napoleon and the French invade Palestine, but he is defeated at Acre. And AD 1873, the temple inscription forbidding Gentiles entrance to the temple court is discovered. All right. That was a lot to cover, and there's a lot of history, so much history in Jerusalem. There's so much history, and it's hard to understand, but when you put the pieces all together, it makes a fuller story. So stay tuned for my next video, and in the meantime, pray, read your Bible, and believe in Jesus. He's the only way to heaven, and we're running out of time to warn you. I want to see you in heaven.